One sentence took me from financial collapse to abundance. Florence Scovel Shinn. There exists within the universe a single sentence that holds the power to transform your entire financial reality. This is not mere wishful thinking or positive psychology, but a fundamental spiritual law that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered and taught with unwavering conviction. The sentence that changed my life forever was simple yet profound. My supply comes from God, and God is the unfailing and immediate source of all my good. When I first spoke these words, I had no idea that I was invoking one of the most powerful spiritual principles known to humanity. Financial collapse had stripped away everything I thought I knew about security and abundance. My bank account was empty, my credit destroyed, and my faith in material provision had crumbled like sand between my fingers. Yet in that moment of complete surrender, the universe prepared to reveal its greatest secret. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that our greatest demonstrations often come through our greatest challenges, and I was about to discover the truth of her words in ways I never imagined possible. The divine sentence works because it addresses the fundamental error in human consciousness regarding supply. Most people believe their good comes from jobs, investments, people, or circumstances. This belief creates limitation because it places our source outside of ourselves and makes us dependent on external conditions. When we recognize that God is our source and that this source is immediate and unfailing, we align ourselves with infinite supply. We stop trying to squeeze water from stones and instead turn to the eternal spring. Florence understood that the spoken word carries creative power when it aligns with divine truth. She taught that our words are not mere sounds, but spiritual forces that shape our reality according to our understanding. When we speak from the consciousness of lack, we create more lack. When we speak from the consciousness of abundance, we open channels for unlimited good to flow into our experience. The divine sentence I discovered works because it states an eternal truth about the nature of supply itself. Your current financial situation is not a punishment or a permanent condition, but rather a reflection of your past thinking and speaking patterns. Every word you have spoken about money, every belief you have held about your worthiness to receive, every fear you have entertained about lack has contributed to your present demonstration. But here is the magnificent truth that Florence proclaimed with such clarity. You can change your entire financial picture by changing your words and aligning them with spiritual law. The moment you begin to speak the truth about your divine source, you set in motion forces that must respond according to universal law. The sentence that transformed my life works for anyone willing to speak it with understanding and persist in its truth regardless of appearances. God as your source means that your supply is not subject to economic conditions, personal limitations, or external circumstances. Your good is already established in the divine mind, waiting only for your recognition and acceptance. Consider the lilies of the field that toil not, neither do they spin, yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. This biblical wisdom that Florence often referenced reveals that nature itself demonstrates effortless abundance when aligned with divine law. You are not separate from this same source that clothes the flowers and feeds the birds. You are an expression of infinite intelligence, designed to experience unlimited good in every area of your life, including your finances. Fear is the great enemy of abundance, and nowhere is this more evident than in our relationship with money. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that fear thoughts are inverted faith, creating exactly what we are afraid of experiencing. When I was trapped in financial collapse, every thought was colored by fear. Fear of losing more, fear of never recovering, fear of what others would think, fear of the future. These fears created a vibrational prison that kept abundance locked away from my experience. The divine sentence begins to break these chains immediately because it redirects our attention from the problem to the solution, from lack to source, from fear to faith. My supply comes from God, and God is the unfailing and immediate source of all my good. Notice how this statement contains no reference to current conditions, past failures, or future concerns. It is a present tense declaration of spiritual truth that stands independent of material appearances. Florence understood that we cannot solve our problems from the same level of consciousness that created them. Financial problems are never really about money. They are about consciousness. They are about our beliefs, our fears, our sense of worthiness, and our understanding of how the universe operates. When we try to solve financial problems with purely material methods, we often find ourselves running in circles, creating temporary relief at best. The consciousness of lack creates more lack, while the consciousness of abundance creates more abundance. This is not a theory, but a demonstrable law that works with mathematical precision. Your financial situation is always an exact reflection of your predominant mental and emotional patterns regarding money and supply. Change these patterns, and your financial reality must change accordingly. Fear-based thinking about money takes many forms. Perhaps you fear that there is not enough to go around, that you must compete with others for limited resources, that you are not worthy of financial abundance, or that money is somehow unspiritual. These beliefs create resistance to the natural flow of supply and block the channels through which your good would otherwise come. Florence taught that we must become aware of these limiting beliefs and replace them with the truth of our divine nature. The truth is that you live in a universe of unlimited supply. The same intelligence that creates stars and galaxies, that maintains the perfect balance of nature, that keeps planets in their orbits, is available to provide for your every need. This is not metaphysical theory, but spiritual fact. The question is not whether the supply exists, but whether you are open to receive it. Your worthiness is not based on your past performance, your current circumstances, or your human efforts, but on your divine inheritance as a child of the Most High. When you speak the divine sentence with understanding, you begin to dissolve the fear patterns that have kept you trapped in limitation. Each repetition builds faith, and faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Your words become bridges between the invisible realm of infinite supply and the visible realm of your daily experience. You stop begging the universe for scraps and start claiming your divine inheritance with confidence and gratitude. Money is not merely paper and coins, stocks and bonds, or digital numbers on a screen. Money is crystallized energy, a symbol of exchange that represents value, appreciation, and the circulation of good. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that everything in the physical world has its spiritual counterpart, and money is no exception. To master money, we must understand its spiritual nature and work with the metaphysical laws that govern its flow. The divine sentence reveals the true mechanics of financial supply. When you declare that your supply comes from God, you are acknowledging that money is simply the material manifestation of divine substance. This substance is unlimited, ever-present, and constantly seeking expression through willing channels. You become such a channel when you align your consciousness with the truth of infinite supply rather than the illusion of scarcity. Florence understood that supply flows along the lines of our thinking and speaking. If you think thoughts of lack and speak words of limitation, you create channels that can carry only restricted good. If you think thoughts of abundance and speak words of prosperity, you create channels wide enough for unlimited supply to flow through. The size of your demonstration is determined by the size of your consciousness, not by external conditions or personal history. Consider how money flows through the economy, like water flows through a river system. It moves from person to person, business to business, account to account, always seeking the path of least resistance. When you create resistance through fear, worry, or beliefs in lack, you dam up the natural flow. When you create acceptance through faith, gratitude, and recognition of your source, you open the floodgates of abundance. The mechanics work through what Florence called the law of supply and demand. But this is not the economic law taught in business schools. This is a spiritual law that operates on higher principles. Your demand is not your need or want, but your spiritual understanding and acceptance. When you truly know that God is your source, you create a demand in consciousness that the universe must fulfill according to divine law. Your relationship with money reflects your relationship with God. If you see God as stingy, limited, or judgmental, you will experience money as scarce and hard to obtain. If you see God as generous, unlimited, and loving, you will experience money as abundant and freely flowing. The divine sentence helps establish the correct relationship by identifying God as your direct source rather than money as your source. Florence taught that we receive exactly what we believe we deserve, no more and no less. This is why affirmations alone are insufficient if they conflict with deep-seated beliefs about worthiness. The divine sentence works because it bypasses personal worthiness issues entirely. It does not depend on your past performance, your current situation, or your human qualifications. It depends only on your recognition of God as the source of all good, including your financial good. Money problems are always consciousness problems, masquerading as external circumstances. When you change your consciousness about money, your money experiences must change. This is not positive thinking, but spiritual law. The same law that governs the growth of plants from seeds governs the manifestation of money from consciousness. Plant seeds of abundance thinking, water them with faith speaking, and harvest the inevitable crop of financial demonstration. The power of the spoken word is one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most important teachings, and nowhere is this power more evident than in the realm of financial demonstration. Your words are not merely sounds that disappear into the air. They are creative forces that shape your reality according to their content and the consciousness behind them. The divine sentence that transformed my financial life works precisely because it harnesses this creative power and directs it toward the truth of unlimited supply. Florence taught that we are always demonstrating something through our words, whether we realize it or not. When you speak words of lack, limitation, and financial struggle, you are using the creative power of the word to produce more of the same. When you speak words of abundance, prosperity, and divine supply, you are using that same power to create channels for unlimited good to flow into your experience. The choice is always yours, and the results are always guaranteed according to spiritual law. The divine sentence works because it contains no reference to current conditions or past experiences. My supply comes from God, and God is the unfailing and immediate source of all my good. Notice how this statement stands independent of your bank balance, your job situation, your credit score, or any material consideration. It is a declaration of spiritual truth that remains constant regardless of appearances, and when spoken with understanding and persistence, it must manifest as improved conditions. Your words create your world, but most people use this creative power unconsciously and often destructively. They speak of bills they cannot pay, money they do not have, opportunities they are missing, and fears about their financial future. Each of these statements sends out a call to the universe for more of the same experiences. The universe responds not to your intentions, but to your expectations, as expressed through your words and sustained in your consciousness. Florence understood that the subconscious mind accepts whatever you tell it most frequently, and with the most emotional intensity. If you spend more time talking about your financial problems than your financial possibilities, you are programming your subconscious to create more problems. If you spend more time declaring your connection to divine supply than complaining about current lack, you are programming your subconscious to recognize and accept greater abundance. The speaking of truth requires both understanding and persistence. You cannot speak the divine sentence once or twice and expect miraculous results if your habitual speech patterns continue to contradict it. Florence taught that we must become vigilant about our words, catching ourselves when we slip into lack consciousness and immediately correcting our speech with statements of truth. This is not self-deception, but self-education in the ways of the Spirit. When you begin speaking your way to prosperity, you may encounter resistance from others who are invested in your remaining limited. Family members, friends, and colleagues may question your new way of speaking and suggest that you are being unrealistic or irresponsible. This is simply their fear consciousness responding to your faith consciousness. Florence advised that we should never argue with doubters, but simply demonstrate through our results. Your words have the power to override genetic patterns, family beliefs, cultural conditioning, and personal history when they are aligned with divine truth and spoken with unwavering conviction. The divine sentence I discovered works because it bypasses all human limitations and goes directly to the source of all supply. When you claim God as your source, you are no longer subject to the financial limitations that govern those who depend on material channels alone. One of the most profound teachings Florence Scovel Shinn shared was about the circulation of good and the importance of keeping abundance flowing through your life rather than hoarding it out of fear. The divine sentence that rescued me from financial collapse works in perfect harmony with this principle of circulation. When you truly understand that God is your unfailing source, you lose the fear that causes people to grasp and hoard, and you begin to participate joyfully in the divine circulation of abundance. Abundance is not meant to be accumulated, but circulated. Like blood in the body or water in a river, abundance must keep moving to remain healthy and life-giving. When blood stops circulating, the body dies. When water stops flowing, it becomes stagnant and poisonous. When abundance stops circulating, it transforms into greed, hoarding, and ultimately, lack. Florence taught that giving and receiving are simply two aspects of the same divine flow, and you cannot cut yourself off from one without limiting the other. The fear of lack causes people to hold on to money so tightly that they strangle the very channels through which more abundance would naturally flow. This is the paradox that Florence identified. The more you try to hold on to money out of fear, the more likely you are to lose it. The more willing you are to let it flow freely through your life, knowing that God is your source, the more abundantly it returns to you multiplied. This does not mean being foolish or careless with money, but rather developing what Florence called divine indifference to material things while maintaining perfect faith in your spiritual source. Divine indifference means you are not worried about money because you know your supply is guaranteed by divine law. You can give freely when inspired to do so because you know that giving creates space for more to enter your life. You can spend wisely on things that bring joy and serve good purposes because you understand that money is meant to be a blessing, not a burden. The divine sentence works synergistically with the law of circulation. When you declare that God is your source, you release the fear-based need to control and manipulate material conditions to ensure your supply. You begin to trust the divine flow, giving when led to give, receiving when others are led to give to you, always maintaining the consciousness that the source is unlimited and eternally available. Florence taught that appreciation is the secret to circulation. When you appreciate the money you have, no matter how little it may seem, you create a vibration that attracts more of the same. When you complain about not having enough money, you create a vibration that repels abundance and attracts more lack. Appreciation is like fertilizer for the seeds of prosperity. It causes them to grow rapidly into full harvest. The circulation principle also applies to your words and thoughts about money. If you hoard thoughts of abundance only for yourself, thinking selfishly about your own financial needs, you limit the flow. If you send out thoughts of abundance for everyone, blessing others' prosperity and success, you create a circulation that includes everyone and benefits everyone, including yourself. Florence called this the law of universal prosperity, where everyone benefits when anyone truly prospers. Your willingness to circulate abundance demonstrates your faith in your divine source. It is easy to give when you have more than enough, but Florence taught that true prosperity consciousness is revealed when you can give from your apparent lack, knowing that God is your source and that your giving creates space for even greater receiving. This is the advanced practice that transforms financial demonstration from a struggle into a joyful dance with divine law. The ultimate truth that Florence Scovel Shinn wanted every student to understand is this: you are not a human being trying to become spiritual, but a spiritual being having a human experience. Your true identity is divine, eternal, and unlimited, which means your natural state is one of complete abundance in every area of life, including finances. The divine sentence that transformed my life from collapse to abundance works because it helps you remember and claim your true identity as a child of the infinite source. Most people live their entire lives identifying with their limitations rather than their possibilities, with their circumstances rather than their spiritual nature, with their history rather than their divine inheritance. This mistaken identity is the root cause of all financial struggle. When you see yourself as separate from your source, as dependent on external conditions for your supply, as limited by past experiences or current circumstances, you create a consciousness of lack that must manifest as financial limitation. The divine sentence, "My supply comes from God, and God is the unfailing and immediate source of all my good," does more than just address your financial needs. It reconnects you with your spiritual identity. It reminds you that you are not a victim of economic conditions, but a co-creator with divine intelligence. It affirms that you are not at the mercy of employers, markets, or material circumstances, but directly connected to the source of all supply. Florence taught that recognition of your divine identity automatically dissolves problems that seemed insurmountable from a human perspective. When you know yourself as a spiritual being with unlimited access to divine supply, financial problems become temporary inconveniences rather than permanent realities. You approach them with confidence rather than fear, with faith rather than doubt, with expectation rather than resignation. Your divine identity includes the quality of abundance as naturally as the sun includes the quality of light. You do not have to earn abundance, deserve abundance, or work for abundance in the way human consciousness suggests. You simply have to recognize and claim the abundance that is already yours by divine right. This is not entitlement, but enlightenment, the understanding of how spiritual law actually operates. The transformation from financial collapse to abundance in my own life happened not because I changed my circumstances, but because I changed my identity. I stopped seeing myself as someone who was broke and started seeing myself as someone whose supply comes from God. I stopped identifying with my bank balance and started identifying with my spiritual nature. I stopped believing in lack as a reality and started recognizing it as simply a temporary appearance contradicting eternal truth. Florence's greatest gift to humanity was showing us how to live from our divine identity while still functioning effectively in the material world. You do not have to retreat from practical responsibilities or ignore material realities. You simply approach them from the consciousness of your true spiritual nature rather than from fear-based human limitation. You pay your bills knowing that God is your source, not your job. You make business decisions trusting divine guidance, not just human reasoning. You invest and save from the consciousness of unlimited supply, not scarcity and fear. The divine sentence continues to work in your life as long as you continue to speak it with understanding and faith. Each repetition strengthens your identity as an abundant being. Each demonstration builds your confidence in spiritual law. Each experience of supply coming from unexpected sources confirms that God truly is your unfailing and immediate source. Your financial life becomes a testimony to the power of spiritual truth and your identity as a divine being having a wonderfully abundant human experience. This is your inheritance, your birthright, and your true nature. The sentence that changed my life from financial collapse to abundance will work the same transformation for you when you embrace it not just as words to speak, but as truth to live, not just as an affirmation to repeat, but as your authentic spiritual identity to claim and express in every moment of your abundant life.